Hi, everyone, and thank you for tuning in tonight to Women of the Bible. As always, it is my pleasure to have you to come and hang out here with me. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into our story. And we're going to be talking about Leah and Rachel this evening. And we're going to start, they appear in Genesis 29, but we're going to go back a little bit. We always have to go back and lay a little foundation, get our backstory in place. So we're going to go back before Genesis 29, just to, before we actually bring Leah and Rachel on the scene. We're going to open up with Esau, Jacob, Rebecca, and Isaac. Okay, now just to give a quick recap, Isaac and Rebecca were married and they had two sons, the twins, Jacob and Esau, with Esau being the oldest. And we all know the story of Esau and Jacob, how Jacob stole his brother's blessing, stole Esau's blessing. And after he did that with the help of his mom, let me not leave that out. Jacob was Rebecca's favorite, and Rebecca helped Jacob to steal Esau's blessing. Isaac was old and he was going blind, and Jacob and Esau were as different as night and day. So Rebecca has Jacob to go and get animal fur and put on his arms, so if Isaac touched him, it would feel like Esau. She got some of Esau's clothes and had Jacob put the clothing on so he would smell like Esau, and did all of the things. So they tricked Isaac, and Isaac ended up giving Jacob the blessing that was meant for Esau. Well, when Esau finds out, he's furious. He is furious. And he makes it very, very clear. As soon as Daddy takes that last breath, as soon as Daddy go, I'm going to kill you. That's basically what he told his brother. As soon as Daddy die, I'm going to kill you. So Rebecca knew that Esau was not playing. She knew that Jacob was going to be in some serious trouble. So she sends Jacob away. She sends him to her brother Laban. Well, when he leaves, Jacob knew that Esau wasn't playing either. So it wasn't like Jacob was like, "No, mama, he ain't gonna do nothing to me." Jacob knew too. So Jacob was down for the getaway. So he leaves and he goes to his uncle. Well, when he arrives in town, he's asking around, does anyone know Laban? Is he still here? Is he doing, because he, probably wasn't sure, may have been a while. And they say, yes, he lives here, he's doing well. And as a matter of fact, here comes his daughter Rachel now with their flock of sheep to water the sheep. So Rachel comes down and she sees Jacob. Jacob introduces himself, and there was the well where they watered the sheep. Jacob, I guess trying to, show them muscles or whatever. He helps them roll the stone away so they can water the sheep and do all of that. And then Rachel goes home to tell her dad that Jacob is in town. So when Jacob gets to the house, his uncle is happy to see him, and Jacob, tells him all about what's happened and everything. And so he stays there a month or so. And then Laban's like, okay, well, I can't just have you here, working for free. So tell me what it is that you want. Well, the Bible tells us that Leah was the oldest daughter, but Jacob was in love with Rachel. The Bible describes Leah as having weak eyes. It describes Rachel as being extremely beautiful with a lovely body. And when I researched weak eyes, a sign of beauty then was to have big dark eyes, dark brown, almond-shaped eyes, and to have light colored eyes. Was like a blemish. It was not something that was considered attractive. So Leah was not the pretty one. Okay, let's just put it that way. Leah was not the pretty one of the two. So after Laban asked Jacob what he wanted, Jacob's response was, "I want Rachel." So Laban said, "Okay, all right. I tell you what we'll do. You work for me for 7 years. And after 7 years, you can marry Rachel." So Jacob was like, okay, cool. 7 years, I can get my woman for that. I can do that. So he works for 7 years, holds up his end of the bargain, works, does everything he's supposed to do. Now, even though he worked for Laban, Laban treated him like family. You know, he wasn't like a regular employee. I mean, he did what he was supposed to do, but he still treated him like family. And he did everything he was supposed to do. 7 years was up. He goes to Laban, basically, look, I've completed my end of the contract. I want my wife. I want to make love to her. Let's go on and get this thing popping. Laban was like, okay, hold on. Wait a minute. We got some traditions here. We're going to have a wedding feast, which was, was tradition. So Laban plans this huge feast. Everyone comes out to celebrate the wedding and all of this. And now it's time to consummate the marriage. Well, by this time, Jacob has gotten a little drunk. Well, he makes it into the marriage chamber, the bedroom. But Laban, being the brother of Rebekah, being conniving, he doesn't send Rachel in. He sends Leah in instead. And Jacob ends up making love to Leah. So when he wakes up in the morning and rolls over and sees Leah and not Rachel, it did not go well. And he wants to know, what have you done? You have deceived me, is what he says. You have deceived me. Now Laban wants to tell him, basically, read the fine print. It is our custom that the eldest daughter marry first. But I tell you what we're going to do. Sound like a used car salesman. Let me tell you what we're going to do. Give Leah a week. Give her her wedding week. And after her wedding week, I'll let you marry Rachel. And then you work for me for another 7 years to pay off that debt. And then we'll be square. But Jacob loved her. He loved Rebekah. So he said, all right, if that's what I have to do, then that's what I have to do. So he gave Leah that week. That week was up. He married he married Rachel. And then he began his second 7-year term of working for his uncle. And during that time, Jacob did not love Leah. It doesn't say that he was cruel to her or he mistreated her, but he did not love her. And the Bible says that because God saw that she was not loved, and I want to make sure that I get that right. God saw that Jacob did not love Leah, and he blessed her with a child. But even after she had that child, it did not change how Jacob felt about her. She had another child, and another one, and another one, until she got to 4. And Jacob still did not feel any differently towards her. And he didn't feel any differently towards Rachel either. He still loved Rachel, even though Rachel had not been able to bear him a child. So you had 2 sisters. One had the man's heart, and the other one had the man's child. And they were jealous of each other because I think they would have probably switched places in order to get what they wanted, because Rachel wanted his children, and she may have been willing to give up his love in order to have his baby. Leah wanted him to love her, and she may have been willing to give up having a child if she could have had his heart. Now, the Bible doesn't say that, but that gives us something to think about, because sometimes we see things from the outside looking in, and we think that we would walk in a certain shoes. We would walk in a person's shoes if we could have what they have. But we don't know where those shoes have been. We don't know what those shoes had to walk through to get to where they are when we see them. But we sometimes make that declaration, oh, I'd give anything to be where they are. I'd do anything to be who they are. I don't know about that one right there. But Leah goes on to have a total of 6 children with Jacob. Then she actually has her servant to have 2 more. So she had 6. Then her servant had 2 for her because there was a time in there where she stopped having children. And then Rachel had a child. And when Rachel had that one child, Leah was like, oh no. Leah goes and has her servant to have 2 children to match the one that Rachel was finally able to have. And then Rachel, when Rachel couldn't have any children, she had her servant to bear 2 children for Jacob. And in those days, the surrogate would actually conceive and give birth between the legs of the wife, as the closest simulation of being of the wife actually giving birth. So that's what Rachel did before she actually had a child herself with Jacob. But then God finally blesses her. He says, God remembers. Now that doesn't mean that God had forgotten about her, because God never forgets about us, never ever forgets about us. But it worded it that way, basically meaning in his time, in God's time, Rachel had a baby, and she named that baby Joseph. And later she goes on to have another child, Benjamin, and she actually dies in childbirth with Benjamin. So Rachel does give Jacob 2 sons. Leah gave him 6, and each of their servants gave him 2. So he ended up with a total of, oh my goodness, was it 12? He ended up with 12 sons and 1 daughter. Leah also gave him a daughter by the name of Dinah. But each woman had their own demon. Each woman had their own demon. And each woman wanted something that the other one had. Leah wanted the love that Jacob had for Rachel. She wanted that love for herself. Rachel wanted the family that Jacob shared with Leah. So they both were not happy when they looked at themselves and they thought their happiness lied in the life of someone else, in another person's reality. And we do that a lot of times now. We look at what another person has. We look at the lifestyle that they live, and not always material things, but just in their career, their marriage, their friends. We look at a person's life without knowing the inside story, without knowing what happens once that door closes. And we will pray to God to give us what we see they have and don't even know how they got it. Don't know the sacrifices they went through to get it. We have to be willing to walk our journey the way God has intended for us to walk our journey. Not look at another person's life and think it's a shortcut, and we want that shortcut. God may take you a different direction, and the scenery may be more beautiful than the way I went. So you can't always look at another person's journey, because that journey may not be meant for you. Leah and Rachel did finally end up coming together, because once their dad was, like I said, that generational curse is a deep and tricky thing, and it ran deep. Rachel had it, Jacob had it, his uncle had it, and Rachel had it. I say Rebecca had it, Jacob had it, Laban had it, Rachel had, all of them had it. But they realized that Laban was basically a dishonest person. He was a dishonest businessman, and he had no intentions of ever letting Jacob leave, because God was blessing Laban through Jacob. And Laban knew that. Laban knew that all of the things that were happening to him, the prosperity that he was seeing since Jacob came, was because God was blessing Jacob. And see, God will bless other people because of you, because of your presence, because you are there, because you work for that company, because you work in that department, because you go to that church, because you married into that family. That's why we have to be careful when we start talking about who belongs here and who belongs there, and who we want to exclude and who we want to include. The person you're trying to exclude may be the person that's carrying your blessing. You think you blessed just because you blessed. You blessed because I'm here. You think you blessed because you blessed. You blessed because she's there. And when God removes that person, that blessing is going to go with them. Laban had sense enough to realize that his blessing and the prosperity that he was seeing was because of Jacob. And he did not want Jacob to leave, because he knew God's blessing was on Jacob. So you have to be careful when you start putting people out of your life and talking about who you're not going to speak to anymore and who you finish with. Jacob knew that he was the reason that Laban was prospering the way he was. Laban knew that Jacob was the reason he was prospering the way he was. And Jacob knew that Laban was not just going to let him walk away. So he took his wife and his children and his possessions, and he left without Laban knowing. And Laban went after him. This is just a little bit. Laban went after him. But God gave Laban a message. And this is something that we might want to use when I said be careful who you want to put in and out of your life, because that person may be tied to your blessing while you think it's because of you, but it's really not. God told Laban, don't say nothing bad to him. Don't say nothing good. In other words, you need to hold it right in the middle of the road. You need to watch your mouth. And I think when I thought about that and it said, don't say nothing good, I was like, well, why do you want to say nothing good? Because sometimes folks don't know what's good. You see, everybody don't know how to give a compliment. Everybody don't know how to say the right thing. So you may think you saying something good and it gets you in trouble. You may think you giving a compliment and it ain't a compliment. So God told him, you don't need to say, it came to him in the dream, you don't need to say nothing bad and you don't need to say nothing good. So in other words, you need to say as little as possible. You need to say as little as possible. And Laban heeded that and told Jacob, God talked to me last night about you and he told me. Okay, that's a lesson some of us need to learn. Everything that you think is okay to say ain't okay to say. And sometimes we might not know the difference between what's good and what's not good. And at that point is when we don't need to say nothing at all. Okay, that's a free tip right there. But thank you so much for tuning in to Women of the Bible. I have enjoyed myself this evening. I hope that you got something out of the story and that you enjoyed it as well. I look forward to seeing you guys next month, the second Tuesday and the second Saturday and the last Tuesday of every month. 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Have a wonderful, wonderful remainder of your evening. And again, thank you so much for supporting Tilted Crown Productions and the Women of the Bible. Good night.